The second and final day of the Eurasian Economic Forum in Belarus is on the way with a focus on food sovereignty among the organization's member countries. The U.S. current trade deficit has increased by $138.2 billion in the first quarter of 2025, marking a record high amid President Trump's trade war. And in Panama, members of the United People's Alliance will continue protesting to demand an end to the criminalization of demonstrations against the Social Security law. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. The second and final day of the Eurasian Economic Forum in Belarus is underway with a focus on food sovereignty among the organization's member countries. During the day, the member countries of the Eurasian Economic Union discuss how food sovereignty is the foundation of true independence. They also discuss the development of the food industry, as well as the medical and social aspects of nutrition and food quality improvement. Meanwhile, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko announced that an informal summit of the Eurasian Economic Community will be held and criticized attacks on Iranian nuclear installations.
The recent strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities under IAEA control are a most dangerous violation of international law, including the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the 1949 Geneva Conventions. I won't even mention the feelings that such actions evoke in Belarus, the country that suffered the most from the Chernobyl nuclear accident.
In a video message to the Eurasian Summit, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian described the U.S. and Israeli attacks as a blatant violation of international law.
I deeply regret that given the current development, I do not have the opportunity to participate in this important summit. Your Excellencies, as you know, the Zionist regime, starting from June 13th, has carried out ruthless, illegal armed attacks and terrorist actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. This aggression occurred amidst indirect negotiations between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States regarding Iran's peaceful nuclear program. Even Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities were targeted. The military provocations by the United States and the Zionist regime against Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities, which were under the full supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency, represent a blatant violation of all international regulations and an irreparable blow to the credibility of the non-proliferation regime by a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council.
In an interview on Iran State TV, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi disclosed that the country has no plans to hold talks with the United States, denying President Donald Trump's claim that negotiations were expected next week. Araghchi stated that Iran is still evaluating whether renewed talks with the U.S. serve its national interests, especially after 5 previous rounds were derailed by U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. He emphasized that the damage inflicted on the sites was not little and that Iran's future diplomatic approach would depend on assessments of its nuclear program, which it maintains are for civilian use only. Araghchi further stated that Israel's war on Iran, its nuclear proposal, was based on 3 main pillars: the continuation of uranium enrichment inside Iran, the lifting of sanctions, and a commitment not to pursue nuclear weapons.
Accountable for the crimes committed. In this regard, I made it crystal clear that Iran's defense.
In this context, according to the Iranian Mehr news agency, the damage inflicted on a unit at Iran's South Pars Phase 14 refinery has been reversed, with operations restored within 10 days after the site was targeted by an Israeli strike. The agency detailed that Iranian engineers managed to rebuild the damaged ground-based unit, restoring the refinery to full operational capacity, while the Israeli attack caused a fire and structural damage National gas production remained uninterrupted due to the complex, resilient infrastructure. The refinery has now also resumed crude gas intake from offshore platforms and launched desalination operations at its fourth train. And Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro held a phone conversation on Friday with the Emir of the State of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. In an official statement, the government unveiled details of the call in which the South American head of state expressed his solidarity with the complex situation that Western Asia has been experiencing in recent weeks, and specifically the state of Qatar, and his hope that the recent ceasefire announced between Iran and the State of Israel is not just a pause, but the beginning of a true structural peace agreement for the entire region. For his part, the Emir of Qatar said he had received Venezuela's proposal to convene a summit for peace and against war and highlighted the nation's diplomatic efforts in favor of regional stability. Both leaders reaffirmed their bonds of friendship and closeness between their peoples and governments, confirming their willingness to continue deepening bilateral cooperation in all areas, and agreed to maintain constant communication and to meet again to continue advancing on joint projects. And Israeli occupation forces reported that a group of settlers illegally entered the northern West Bank city of Nablus, where they raided the tomb of Joseph. The incursion bursted out clashes with Palestinian residents, since the monument is worshipped by Muslims, Christians, and Jews. According to the Israeli army, those responsible were evacuated from the site, and they would be handed over to the Israeli police to continue with the corresponding investigation. Meanwhile, Palestinian authorities reiterated that the entry of Israeli citizens to the area was dangerous and was prohibited by law. And on Friday, Israeli occupation targeted areas north of the Litani River, implementing a fire belt tactic intended to cause widespread destruction across southern Lebanon. Authorities registered 1 woman killed and another 20 civilians injured. The strikes hit the Ali al-Tahrir Heights, with some explosions occurring dangerously close to civilian homes on the town's outskirts. Firefighting crews battled wildfires that broke out in nearby forested areas as a result of the bombardment. The violation marks another of thousands since the ceasefire took effect on November 27, 2024, amid continued Israeli incursions into Lebanese border villages, daily drone attacks, and violent air raids targeting Lebanese infrastructure. And in Yemen, citizens rallied to show their support for Palestine and to condemn Israeli aggressions in the region. Protesters mobilized under the slogan, "We will continue to support Gaza and holy sites, no matter the challenges." The mobilization also expressed gratitude for the success of the recent attacks by the Yemeni armed forces and the continuation of the naval and air blockade against Israel. The Yemeni people reaffirmed their full commitment to the leader of the revolution, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, to take the appropriate decisions in support of the Palestinian cause. Now we have our first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. The U.S. current trade deficit has increased by $138.2 billion in the first quarter of 2025, marking a record high amid President Trump's trade war. The current account measures the flow of goods, services, and investments into and out of the country, as well as its earnings and spending abroad. As a percentage of gross domestic product, the deficit increased by 1.8 percentage points to 6.0%, which is the highest level since the peak recorded in 2006. Experts and analysts agree that this 44% increase is the result of companies rushing to import goods before new tariffs are imposed, which are expected to continue. And on Friday, China clarified statements made by U.S. President Donald Trump regarding an alleged agreement with China on tariffs. Beijing has clarified that it will review and approve applications for the export of controlled items in accordance with laws and regulations. According to the Geneva and London meetings, the United States will eliminate a series of restrictive measures against China in response. Ministry of Commerce spokesman He Yadong particularly wanted to clarify statements about rare earths. He confirmed that a number of applications had been approved and noted that they will continue to strengthen the review and approval process for qualifying operations. Venezuela and China celebrate the 51st anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. In this context, Caracas highlighted the strategic partnership among the nations. Through an official statement, the Venezuelan government emphasized how, thanks to the wise leadership of President Xi Jinping and President Nicolas Maduro, the friendship between their peoples has advanced toward a splendid stage and a solid strategic partnership at all times and under all circumstances, with a view to promoting shared development and mutual benefit, and reaffirmed that Venezuela and China will continue to move toward a future of shared prosperity, deepening their joint efforts based on mutual respect, complementarity, and reciprocity. And on Friday, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto met with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim to discuss expanding their countries' bilateral cooperation. Malaysian Prime Minister was welcomed at the Halim Perdanakusuma Air Force Base in Jakarta by the Composite Honor Guard and a delegation from Indonesia, including the Minister of Investment, Foreign Affairs, and Governor of Jakarta. Ibrahim's official visit to Jakarta includes an important agenda, which includes a meeting with leaders from both countries. These meetings between Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur aim to maintain dialogue and strengthen the long-standing ties between the two countries. And the Cambodian government has warned of rising tensions along the border with Thailand following a month of clashes in the Mong Bay region. Senate President Hun Sen ordered the deployment of security forces to the region and instructed them to remain on high alert in the event of an armed conflict with Thailand. During his first visit to the province, Hun Sen stated that Cambodia does not want war but will stand firm against any hostile force that tries to violate its sovereignty. In other news, in the Central African Republic, the government declared 3 days of national mourning to honor the 30 students killed in an incident at the Barthélemy Boganda High School in Bangui. In this regard, President Faustin Archange also expressed his deepest condolences to the victims' families. The incident occurred a few meters from the National Assembly when some 5,000 students crowded, attempting to find the exit door of the school after the explosion of a generator. As a result, at least 30 of them died and 260 were injured and are being treated at the hospital. In this context, authorities estimated the figure could rise as the seriousness of the wounded was still to be disclosed. And ahead of the next year's general elections in Sweden, the far-right Sweden Democrats Party issued a public apology for its Nazi past. The apology came following a study to determine what people thought about the party's positions on Nazism. Some of its current members described that past as despicable and reprehensible and apologized to the Swedish people. Party leader Jimmy Åkesson repeatedly tried to distance the party from its extremist roots and rebrand its public images, even though it still supports xenophobic and discriminatory ideas. We have our second break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification buttons to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final break, don't go away. On Friday in Panama, members of the United People's Alliance will continue protesting to demand an end to the criminalization of demonstrations against the Social Security law. Representatives of social and political unions indicated that demonstrators are expected to march toward the National Assembly in Tegucigalpa. Panamanians are demanding an end to human rights violations and excessive abuse by state security forces, particularly in Bocas del Toro province. The Latin American Episcopal Council and regional human rights organizations are calling for solidarity with the people amid the country's economic, social, and political crisis. Social and political crisis that the country is suffering. And Panama Canal Affairs Minister Jose Ramon Icaza reiterated that neither the Treaty of Neutrality nor the organic law allow free transits of ships. The statements come in response to U.S. demands for free passage for its warships and support vessels. Despite pressure from high-ranking U.S. officials, Panama maintains its position of strictly complying with its legal framework and seeking compensation mechanisms. During the visit of the head of the Pentagon in April, a joint declaration was signed reaffirming Panama's right to expedite the passage, but always within the framework of current legislation. Panama stresses that the canal will continue to be a strategic sovereign landmark with clear rules that benefit all nations that use it. And in Haiti, amid a major political and institutional crisis, former Prime Minister Claude Joseph was questioned for his alleged involvement in the assassination of former President Jovenel Moïse. The hearing was held at the Court of Appeal in Port-au-Prince as part of an investigation that has yet to be finally resolved. The summons was issued by examining magistrate Walter Voltaire, who has pointed to several public figures as part of a complex and delicate plot. Meanwhile, Claude Joseph denounced that the process is politically motivated, although he reiterated that he had collaborated with the justice system from the beginning. The case is taking place amid growing social pressure to clarify a crime that shocked the country and revealed deep fractures in the Haitian state. And in Bolivia, farmer leaders and President Luis Arce warned of the imminent risk of the right returning to control of the country's administration in the August elections due to divisions and risk of fracture that persists within the popular camp. Correspondent Freddy Morales with the details.
The
46th anniversary of the creation of the United Confederation of Agricultural Workers of Bolivia were the framework for the revival of the ancient demands of this sector, which, according to its leaders, began after the start of Spanish colonialism more than 500 years ago.
Se rebelaron nuestros ancestros contra los opresores.
Our ancestors rebelled against their oppressors, they rebelled against their executioners who usurped our lands, our territory.
Nuestro territorio. Eso tenemos que entender perfectamente qué es el territorio.
We must understand perfectly what territory is because we always had territory, we always had our ancestral languages, we always had our customary laws, that is what we were claiming.
Siempre tuvimos nuestras normas constitucionarias.
Y se insistió en promover la unidad de los sectores populares.
And there was an emphasis on promoting unity among the popular sectors to avoid what is considered an imminent return of the right to government in the elections next August. We will continue to fight in the countryside and the city. There are also our professionals who are here, and we will always carry on our process of change. The right wing wants to gradually enter our communities, but we have a strong structure, so let's not let them. These politicians are back and want to brainwash us with their usual gifts, but let's not let them, brothers.
El presidente Luis Arce se sumó a las advertencias.
The president of the country joined in the warnings about the risk of internal division that could weaken social movements.
Esas amenazas externas continúan.
We are not free from threats. These external threats continue. Imperialism, oligarchies, racist, and fascist right-wing groups continue to conspire to destabilize our process. But the most worrying thing is that internal threats are growing. Today we face a trade union situation that wants to fragment our organization from within.
Las amenazas internas están creciendo.
Y recordó que en esta fecha, hace un año,
He recalled that on this date 1 year ago, the then commander of the armed forces attempted a coup d'etat, which he later described as a self-coup in favor of the government.
El propio Zúñiga detenido y sometido a proceso, divulgó una
The
carta.
commander himself, arrested and brought to trial, released a letter about these events, which the president described as proof that there was a real attempt to overthrow him.
Dice, oficiales y suboficiales, sargentos y soldados.
There was insubordination, but further on it says much more clearly officers and non-commissioned officers. Sergeants and soldiers who, with their souls wounded, stood up and said enough to the manipulation, to the forgetfulness, to the political use. That day we raised our voices for dignity, for duty, and love of country. Look, there was a confessed coup d'etat here in your note today.
Golpe de Estado confeso, aquí, en su nota de hoy.
La Confederación Sindical Única de Campesinos es una
The Single Confederation of Peasants is one of the 5 social organizations that form part of the so-called unity
que se han constituido en el respaldo popular
pact and that have been established in support of the socialist movement that has governed the country for the past 19 years. That political movement is now divided into 4 factions that have decided to run their own candidate in the August 17 elections.
en las elecciones del 17 de agosto. Freddy Morales, TeleSUR, Bolivia.
On Thursday, Colombian President Gustavo Petro announced a millionaire investment towards guaranteeing steady electric service for indigenous communities. Precisely, Petro unveiled that close to $13 million will be allocated to provide power for 59 Wayuu communities in the municipality of Manaure, department of La Guajira, in the north of the country. The project, which includes the financing of 2 energy projects aimed at expanding service coverage in remote rural areas historically affected by a lack of access to basic services, will be implemented by the Institute for the Planning and Promotion of Energy Solutions for Non-Interconnected Areas with the support of the Ministry of Mines and Energy. In Colombia, the death toll following a landslide in Antioquia rose to 16. The disaster struck between Medellin and Bello on Tuesday due to heavy rains that caused a nearby creek to overflow. Authorities added that at least 15 people remain missing and the search and rescue efforts continue. Nearly 1,000 people have been evacuated from the surrounding areas as a preventive measures. Mayor of Bello, Lorena Gonzalez, warned about the instability of the terrain and emphasized the danger faced by rescue workers operating in extremely adverse conditions. At this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.